to, G to the M would be computationally hiding, just because, it depends on the group, but I guess, but yeah, basically, if I give somebody G to the M and they want to know M, they have to solve the discrete log problem. If the discrete log problem is hard in the group, then to a computationally bounded party, G to the M does not let that party identify M. But anyway, the point of the blinding factor is to make the commitments perfectly hiding rather than at best computationally hiding. Okay. Good. So that's Peterson commitments. And we showed in previous sessions that if anyone who can open a commitment to two different values, so that means for any commitment C, if I can identify like an M and an R as well as an M prime and an R prime with M does not equal M prime, yet C equal to G to the M times H to the R as well as to G to the M prime times H to the R prime, I can actually solve for the discrete logarithm of G to base or of H to base G. So did we discuss this previously? So this means that Peterson commitments are indeed binding as long as nobody in the world knows the discrete logarithm of H to base G. And so in particular, if capital G is a cryptographic group and G and H were sort of chosen at random or sort of output by a pseudo-random, cryptographic PRG or something, nobody in the world should be able to compute this X, and hence Peterson commitments with those sort of randomly generated group elements as the commitment key should be binding. Unless, of course, we have a quantum computer which can compute discrete logarithms efficiently. Okay, so those are Peterson commitments. So now I want to cover an honest verifier, perfect zero knowledge, proof of knowledge, that the prover knows how to open some Peterson commitment C. So that is the witness for the prover's claim is, the prover knows an M and a R such that C equals G to the M times H to the R. Okay, so I'm going to describe this scheme to you now. Does anyone want to ask a question before I do? All right. So what the prover does at the start of the scheme is it basically sends a Peterson commitment to a completely random value. So that is, it sends a commitment A set to G to the D times H to the, let me call it, I don't know, R prime, where D is D and R prime here were both chosen to be random exponents by the prover. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, let me take a step back before telling you how the rest of this protocol works. So, if the prover wanted to prove it knows this witness, that is an M and an R such that, the Peterson commitment C equals G to the M times H to the R, that is, it's a Peterson commitment to M. The trivial proof of that is to just send the witness to the verifier, send M and R to the verifier. But that, of course, is not zero knowledge. It's just telling the verifier M, right? Which is like the grossest possible violation of zero knowledge. So instead, what the prover is going to do conceptually here is rather than opening up C itself, okay, it's going to commit to some other random message D. And then rather than opening C itself, it's instead going to open a commitment that's a commitment to a random linear combination of D and M. So yeah, and it'll turn out that because D is completely random and the verifier doesn't know what D is, opening up a commitment to a random linear combination of D and M actually leaks no information at all about M, right? So if D is random and I tell you what M plus D is, you actually learn nothing. M is, M plus D is a uniform random exponent. Okay, so the first message that the prover sends in this zero knowledge proof of knowledge of an opening of a Peterson commitment C is just a Peterson commitment to some random value. Okay, the verifier responds with a random exponent E. Okay, and then what the prover does is it opens up not C itself, but C prime. And C prime is C to the E times A. Okay, and let me explain what's happening there. I actually should have reminded you about homomorphism before I started covering this protocol, but I forgot to. Okay, so C to the E times A is a homomorphically computed commitment to E times M plus D. Okay, so what's happening here is Peterson commitments are homomorphic. So that is, I can give you a commitment to two different values, say M and D. And given these two commitments with even, let's say I'm the verifier and I know these two commitments, but I have no idea the values M and D that live inside them. I can nonetheless derive a commitment to M plus D just by applying the group operation to the two commitments. So C prime times C is a commitment to M plus D. And in particular, anyone who can open C to M and C prime to D can open C prime times C to M plus D. Okay, and if you want to just see the algebra of this, note like if C is G to the M times H to the R, and C prime is G to the M prime times, I guess I call it D, G to the D times H to the R prime, then C times C prime is G to the M plus D times H to the R plus R prime. And so anyone who knows M, R, D, and R prime can open C times C prime to M plus D by providing the opening information R plus R prime. So that is applying the group operation to two commitments results in summing up the two committed messages and summing up the two committed blinding factors, the exponents. And so in this way, you can kind of do, quote, addition of committed messages underneath the commitments. That is, I can take two commitments without knowing the messages inside them. I can nonetheless get a commitment to their sum. And that's what's happening here when we look at the commitment C to the E times A. That is just a commitment. If C is a commitment to M and A is a commitment to D, C to the E times A is a commitment to E times M plus D. And so again, conceptually, what's happening is, the trivial proof system would just be for the prover to open up C itself, but that would violate zero knowledge because it leaks the witness M comma R to the verifier. So instead, what the prover will do is commit to some random garbage D, and then wind up opening up not C itself, but a linear combination of the message inside C with the random garbage. The verifier learns not M itself, but E times M plus D, and because of the verifier doesn't know what D is, it doesn't wind up getting any information whatsoever about M. Okay, so formally, so that's the protocol. That's it. But formally, I want to establish that this is an honest verifier, perfect zero knowledge protocol, establishing that the prover knows how to open C to some message M. And so in order to establish that, there are two properties I need to explain. So one is that the protocol is satisfies special soundness. which implies knowledge soundness. So this requires that given two accepting transcripts with the same first message but different verifier challenges. So let me write those transcripts as A, comma, E, comma, A, comma, E, comma, let me call it, I don't know, M prime, comma, no, maybe not M prime. Let me just come up with two letters to use. I don't know, I need a new message. I don't know, N, comma, Z. Yeah, let's go with that. And A, comma, E prime, N prime, comma, Z prime. So given these two accepting transcripts with E does not equal E prime, I need to argue that there's a way to solve for M, comma, R, solve for a witness, which is M, comma, R, such that, the commitment C equals G to the M times H to the R. Right. So special soundness says, like, basically conceptually, if the prover is prepared after sending the first message A to answer two different verifier challenges, E and E prime, then it must actually know a witness for the claim that it's making. And so the way we formalize that is by requiring that, given the prover's successor response to both E and to E prime, one can efficiently actually compute a witness. So we have to establish special soundness, and then we have to establish honest verifier perfect zero knowledge by giving a simulator, an efficient simulator that outputs transcripts distributed identically to the transcripts produced by the honest prover interacting with the honest verifier. Okay, so I'm going to run through these two analyses now, and they won't take, I think each will maybe take max 10 minutes, hopefully less if I do a good job. Does anyone want to ask a question at this point? No? Okay. So let's start with special soundness first. So I'm going to do sort of two different presentations. One, I will just sort of be sort of grinding through the algebra, giving what M and R is in terms of the two accepting transcripts. But then I will present intuition, that is how I think you should actually think of what's going on in the special soundness analysis. So yeah, let me just pull up the algebra to make sure I don't make a mistake. So I always make mistakes. 1 second, almost there. Here we go. Okay, good. So yeah, let's start with special soundness first. Okay, so we have these two accepting transcripts, and I need to solve for the witness. So let's say that, I'll tell you just what the witness is. So let the witness, let the M in the witness be the difference of the two messages. So N minus M prime divided by the difference in the two challenges, E minus E prime. And let's let R be the difference in the two blinding factors, Z minus Z prime, divided by the difference in the two challenges, E minus E prime. And the claim is that G to the M times H to the R equals C. And here's the proof. So G to the M times H to the R, just writing out the definitions of M and R, that's G to the N minus N prime times H to the Z minus Z prime, all quantity to the 1 over E minus E prime, right? That's all I did was write out the definition of, I substituted, this in for M and this in for R and pulled out the shared quotient E minus E prime. Good. And remember, the fact that these are two accepting transcripts tells you that, remember, the verifier, the check on the first transcript is that C to the E times A equals G to the n times h to the z. And the check on the second transcript is that c to the e prime times a equals g to the n prime times h to the z prime. And so that tells us that this quantity here, g to the n minus n prime times h to the z minus z prime, so I'm just going to look at this g to the n times h to the z. So we know that that is c to the e times a, just by, let me put boxes around this. So by focusing just on the two terms that have a red box, that's, the verifiers confirm that those equal c to the e times a. That's what the verifiers check on the first transcript is. And similarly, the verifiers check on the second transcript guarantees, let me put a different color box around this, that g to the minus n prime times h to the minus z prime is c to the e prime times a. And so that will, so then we simplify that to be, then so if I raise this whole thing to the 1 over e minus e prime, you should just get out c. So I guess the a's cancel, so it's just a little bit of algebra. So what, so this in fact equals c to the e minus e prime to the 1 over e minus e prime, and then these cancel and you're just left with c. Okay, so that is the proof that indeed, given these two accepting transcripts, I can solve for a witness as here. So that was very mechanical. Probably doesn't give you much intuition for what's really going on here, like why it has to be the case, really, conceptually, that the prover being prepared to answer the challenges E and E prime tell you that the prover must know a witness. So let me give a different sort of more intuitive presentation for what's going on. So when the verifier checks the first transcript for acceptance, confirms that c to the e times a equals g to the n times h to the r. The way to think about what the verifier is really checking is it, remember, like, there is some, if the prover is honest anyway, there is some m and r such that c equals g to the m times h to the r. And similarly, if the prover is honest and knows how to open A, then there is some D and R prime such that A equals G to the M prime times H to the R prime. Now, the extractor that just sees the two transcripts does not know what M or R or M prime or R prime is, and is trying to solve for them. So we need to solve for the unknowns. So the pink circled unknowns. So there's 4 unknowns we want to solve for. I mean, ultimately, we only really care about solving for M and R, but the solver knows C and A, but doesn't know the 4 unknowns here. But the fact that C to the A E times A equals G to the N times H to the R, which is what the verifier check confirms with the first transcript, will tell you that E times M plus R equals, no, let me make sure I said this right. I think I'm doing this wrong. Sorry. It'll tell you, remember, C to the E times A is, sorry, I messed up the notation here. Not M prime. I was calling it D before. Sorry. The book calls it M prime. Sorry. Yeah, so c to the e times a, what does that equal? It equals g to the e times m plus d times h to the e times r plus r prime. And so the fact that c to the e times a equals g to the n times h to the r is equivalent to saying, so this equality in green here is equivalent to what I'm about to write in orange, is equivalent to saying that E times M plus D equals N, and E times R plus R prime equals R. Am I must have. No, I meant Z. Sorry, I'm messing. I'm making the notation up as I go. Sorry, and screwing it up. Apologies. Equals Z. Sorry. Yeah. So anyway, in summary, if the prover does know how to open the two commitments C and A, then the verifier's check on the first accepting transcript gives two linear equations in the four unknowns. So there are four unknowns: M, R, D, and R prime, and we just got two linear equations in them. So and let me just circle in pink the unknowns here: M, R, D, and R prime. Right. So those are the unknowns, but the extractor, like E, N, and Z are all in that transcript. So the extractor knows E, N, and Z, but does not know M, D, R, and R prime. And then the second transcript, by guaranteeing, the verifier checks, that C to the E prime times A equals G to the N prime times H to the Z prime. That gives two more linear equations in two unknowns, in the four unknowns. That tells you that E prime times M plus D equals N prime, and E prime times R plus R prime equals Z prime. So let me circle the unknowns again. And so now we have four linear equations and four unknowns, and one can actually show that they're linearly independent. That will follow from the fact that E and E prime are not the same. So we have four linearly independent equations in four unknowns. And so we can, that's enough to solve for all four unknowns, can solve the equations for all the unknowns, M, D, R, and R prime. And if you were to actually solve them and look at what the expression for M and R is, it would be exactly what I wrote up here. So that's what's sort of really going on in this. Something like this is happening like in all Sigma protocols that are sort of similar to Schnorr's protocol for knowledge of a discrete logarithm. Basically, each accepting transcript provides, like, the fact that the transcript is accepting implies some number of linear equalities are satisfied, where the unknowns in the linear equalities tend to be the exponents of the group elements that go into the verifier's check in the Sigma protocol. And so if you collect enough transcripts such that the number of linear equations you're guaranteed hold equals the number of unknowns, the number of unknown exponents, you can actually just solve the linear equations for the exponents. And the way you formally show special soundness is you then just take those solutions and confirm that they in fact give a witness, which tends to just be grinding through some algebra the way we did up here. But conceptually, where would you actually come up with the definition of the witness that you then show satisfies, like, is indeed a witness? This is the conceptual version. You take the sequence of linear equalities given by passing the verifier's checks in each of the accepting transcripts that the special soundness extractor is handed, and solve those linear equalities, and that's going to tell you what the definition of the witness should be. Okay, any questions about that?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not like always a linear system, but like in this perspective, if there are like less than like 2x the number of unknowns as opposed to like equations, then I guess it's not honest verifier zero knowledge.
Yeah. So if you could solve for the witness from one transcript rather than two or more, that would be a gross violation of zero knowledge, right? That would tell you like, the proof itself leaks the witness. But if it requires, two different accepting transcripts or more than two, and the accepting transcripts have to share some non-trivial structure, like having the same first challenge, that does not violate zero knowledge, because there's no way for the actual verifier to obtain those two transcripts. Only like a knowledge extractor would have the power to like force the prover via rewinding to provide it those two transcripts, basically. Does that make sense?
Yes. But like, let's say in the case that like given one transcript, you have like X unknowns, and then you have like a little bit more than X equations. Like, I feel this still implies like maybe you can't solve for any of the unknowns, but like you can. It's still not zero knowledge, right?
It depends. So it easily could be. So okay, let's say like there are there are, I don't know, 4 unknowns and one transcript gives you 3 linear equalities. Okay. So let's say the unknowns are like, I don't know, let's say the witness consists of just one unknown W, but then there are these 3 other unknowns, I don't know, A1, A2, A3, that just go into the protocol. I don't know, these are just random values generated that prover that go into the prover's messages somehow. It's entirely possible that for that for any given transcript, W is still distributed like uniformly at random given the transcript, something like that. So let's say the transcript might tell you that, I don't know, W plus A1 equals some value. The first prover message M1. W plus A2 equals the second prover message M2, and W plus A3 equals the third prover message M3. Okay, so if I give you here we have it. Like, this is the world's dumbest protocol. I don't know. The prover just sends W plus A1, W plus A2, W plus A3. So there are 4 unknowns, 3 linear equalities. This still tells you nothing about W, right? Because for any fixed W, for randomly chosen A1, A2, A3, M1, M2, M3 are still, whatever. If I tell you M1, M2, M3, like W is still just uniformly randomly distributed. So as long as there's like one extra degree of freedom, 3 at most 3 linear equations that one transcript tells you is satisfied, but there are 4 unknowns or more, you can still have zero knowledge. Did that make a little bit of sense?
Yeah, this makes sense. Also, is there a name, like if you acquire like 10 transcripts to extract the witness, is there a name for that?
Yeah, there is. So when you start, we're pretty soon we're going to talk about like bulletproofs, okay? And that is that's a multi-round protocol. So like standard special soundness talks about these Sigma protocols where there's just one verifier challenge, and so you think of the 2 transcripts that the extractor needs to extract, AEZ and A, E prime, Z prime. You think of them as like leaves of a depth 1 binary tree where the branching is based on like the verifier message E or E prime. And that's just called like special soundness. But bulletproofs is a many round protocol. And the relevant tree, actually, you need like 3 transcripts at each level. So it's like a multi-round protocol. So if it were 2 messages, then like, each of these edges here would be labeled with 1 verifier challenge. So like the round 1 verifier challenge, and then at the next level, we'd have like the round 2 verifier challenges. E2 prime, E2, anyway. And so that, people will call these, these deep trees, they'll call, the ability to take one of these deep trees and identify a witness from the tree. They'll call that like generalized special soundness. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the term is, but the branching factor one needs, like the number of transcripts one needs, like you said, 10 as an example. I think what do they call it? They might call it, like, if it's a branching factor mu, they might call it something like mu special soundness or something. So there is a terminology. The book might or might not. I don't remember if I used the terminology or not. If I do, I just pulled it out of some standard paper. Yeah, but so there are examples both of more rounds in the protocol, and which means you need more transcripts to extract from, and in terms of how many verifier challenges you need for each round of the protocol. That can there are examples where that can go higher than 2. Bulletproof's example where it's 3. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks.
Great. Other questions? Cool. Okay, so that is special soundness of this the Sigma protocol for the prover to establish that it knows how to open a Peterson commitment. So let's talk about honest verifier perfect zero knowledge. So establishing this formally requires to give a simulator. The simulator has to output accepting transcripts, and the transcripts need to be distributed identically to transcripts produced by the honest prover interacting with the honest verifier. And for Sigma protocols, these simulators always sort of operate in the same manner. So they sort of generate the transcripts in reverse. So the prover itself generates the first message A, which is supposed to be like a commitment to some random junk, message D and blinding factor, what I call R prime. The prover would pick A first, then the verifier would pick E, and then the prover's response would be, I guess it would be G to the, what did I say it was? E times M plus D times H to the E times R plus R prime. So that's how the prover works. The simulator is going to generate the transcripts in reverse. So it's going to pick E at random, so random exponent, and it's going to pick the prover's response to that challenge at random. So I don't know what to call this. Let me call it T, random group element. And then it's going to back solve for a first message A to make this into an accepting transcript. So it would set A to B, right? Basically exactly what you need to pass the verifier's check. So the verifier checks that C to the E times A equals, I'm sorry. I messed up what the format of the last message in this protocol. Yeah, the last message that the prover sends is not a group element. It's an opening of a group element. So it sends what I call it N and Z. Sorry about that. So we have N and Z are both would be random exponents. As far as the simulator goes. So yeah, the transcript was not. Sorry about that. So mess this up. The prover responds with the opening of the derived commitments, that opening being E times M plus D and E times R plus R prime. Sorry. Okay, anyway, so yeah, the simulator picks E at random and picks the opening information at random, and then back solves for valid opening information for the derived commitment. The verifier's check is that C to the E times A equals G to the N times H to the Z. So you just solve this equation for A. So A should be G to the N times H to the Z over C to the E. So that's what it would set A to be. Yeah. I don't know. Writing things at random here. So that's what it set to A to B. Yeah, so that's how the simulator works. And it's just I'll just say verbally. I mean, it's either sort of obvious or I guess you could write out the probabilities if you wanted to. That these two transcripts are distributed the same. So they're sort of generated by different processes, but they have the same distribution. So, what's going on here is if I tell you, um, if I tell you A and E, that and you already know, so yeah, if I tell you A and E, that uniquely determines the final prover message, the opening of the derived commitment, and so uh, and that opening, is so it's like deterministically determined by the A and E, or at least the D and the R prime that go into determining A. So if I tell you D and R prime and E, I deterministically have specified the relevant final message of the prover, but that final message is distributed uniformly due to the randomness that goes into the way that A is chosen, and so if I instead pick that final message at random, and kept the verifier challenge random, and back solve for A, it's the same process. So going from A and E to the final message results in the same distribution as picking the E in the final message at random, and back solving for A. Okay, so it's not the best presentation of the equivalence of the two distributions, but hopefully you get the idea. And in summary, the intuition at least should be clear, that what the prover does not actually open up the commitment itself, that it's proving it knows an opening for. Instead, it opens up this commitment, this derived commitment, which is obtained from the original commitment, by sort of taking the value inside the original commitment and adding the random quantity D to it. And so the verifier does learn sort of the value inside the derived commitment, but because it's randomized by D and the verifier doesn't learn any information about D, the verifier actually doesn't learn, and learning E times M plus D without learning D doesn't actually tell the verifier anything about M. That's the intuition. Okay, so that is how one can prove that one knows how to open a Peterson commitment without actually leaking any information about the value you know how to open it to. Okay, any questions about that? Okay. So there's a slightly more complicated protocol that I'm not going to cover, but I do encourage you to just glance at it in the book. So it looks a lot like the one we just saw, just with like the prover sending more values in each round, and it lets the following happen. So given three commitments, say C prime and C prime prime. This more complicated protocol lets the prover prove in zero knowledge that it knows how to open C to message M, C prime to message M prime, and C prime prime to message M prime prime, such that M prime prime is the product of M and M prime. Okay, so I call this, proving a product relationship between committed values. So, the verifier learns that the values inside the three commitments satisfy this product relationship, with the value inside the third commitment being the product of the values inside the first two. But the verifier doesn't learn anything about the values inside the first two. Okay. So let's just take that for granted. And once we have these two zero knowledge proofs of knowledge regarding knowing how to open Peterson commitments, and the values inside the Peterson commitments, we're now ready to give our first zero knowledge argument for circuit set. Again, please jump in with a question at any time if you have one. I think this argument will take maybe 15 minutes to present. which I think that puts us roughly on schedule for what I was hoping for. Yeah. Okay. So let me just remind you what circuit sat is. So I'm going to address arithmetic circuit sat. So here a circuit consists of addition and multiplication gates, and the inputs are elements of a finite field. And so I don't know, let's say we have 4 inputs to the circuit. Maybe this addition gate sums up the first 2, this multiplication gate multiplies, the second 2, and this addition gate, I don't know, adds up the last 2. Then maybe we multiply, some of these together, and the final output is multiplies those results. Sure. Let's just say that the prover is claiming to know a W, so an input to the circuit, that causes the circuit to output 1. Okay. And I want to explain the zero knowledge argument for the prover to establish it knows this W, but leaks no information about W. Okay, so the way this is going to work is as follows. The prover will send a Peterson commitment to basically every gate in the circuit. Let me clarify that a bit. So to every element of the witness, and to the value, for every multiplication gate. Okay. You can conceptually think of the prover as like also sending commitments for the addition gates, but what's going to happen is the prover doesn't actually need to send a witness for any addition gate, because Peterson commitments are additively homomorphic. So, for example, if the prover sends a commitment C1 to W1 and a commitment C2 to W2, the verifier on its own can derive a commitment to the value of the addition gate. So can derive, using homomorphism, a commitment to the value of each addition gate. So for example, a commitment to the value of this addition gate is just, C1 times C2, is a commitment to W1 plus W2, right? If I give you a commitment to, W1 and W2, homomorphically, the verifier, without knowing what W1 and W2 are, can nonetheless derive a commitment to their sum, right? So yeah, so conceptually, by committing only to the witness elements and the multiplication gates, the prover is effectively committing also to the values of the addition gates. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? All right. So conceptually, in this way, the prover has committed to the value of every single gate in the circuit. And now what the verifier is going to do is, it's going to insist that the prover proves, in zero knowledge, that it knows how to open each commitment that it sent. That is using the zero knowledge proof of knowledge of, opening of a Peterson commitment that we covered earlier today, 10 minutes ago. That way, the verifier, is actually convinced that there is a value inside each commitment, right? If the prover just sends a group element, which it says is a commitment to a value, it's possible that in fact the prover has no idea how to open that commitment to any value, and hence it's like just an empty locked box that no one can open. But once the prover proves that it knows how to open each commitment, then the verifier knows it's okay to think of each commitment as like a locked box that does indeed have a value inside of it. The prover does know how to open the box and reveal the value, although the prover never will do that. It will only prove it could if it wanted to. Okay, and then finally, for each, I don't know why I'm writing suddenly very thick. Oh, there we go. For each multiplication gate, say, okay, so let's just write, let's say here's a multiplication gate. We've got the result of 2 other gates feeding into it. Let's say C1 is a commitment to the value of the first gate, C2 is a commitment to the value of the second gate being fed into the multiplication gate, and C3 is the commitment the prover sent to the multiplication gate itself. So the prover proves in zero knowledge that the value M3 inside C3 is indeed the product. So is M1 times M2, where M1 is the value inside C1 and M2 is the value inside C2. Okay. And that's the protocol I told you to just sort of take for granted exists, and you can look at it in the book, and it looks a lot like the zero knowledge proof of knowledge of knowing how to open a single Peterson commitment, but it's more complicated because there are three commitments and you're establishing a product relationship between the three. And then finally, the prover establishes not only that it knows how to open the commitment to the output gate, but in fact, that the opening is to value 1. And we haven't discussed that, how that works in detail, but it's literally just Schnorr's protocol. So if the commitment to the output gate is C, and you want to prove that C is of the form G to the 1 times H to the R for some R, well, that's equivalent to proving that P knows R such that let's see, H to the R equals C over G. And that's just knowledge, proving knowledge of the discrete log of, C times G inverse to base H. So Schnorr's sigma protocol is a way to prove, the discrete log of one group element with base another group element. That's exactly what's going on here. So, the prover establishing that it knows how to open the output gate to 1, to value 1, is literally, you can just use Schnorr's protocol to prove that. Okay, so that's the protocol. Okay, conceptually, what's happening is the following. The prover is just committing to the witness and then proving that indeed, if you evaluated the circuit gate by gate on the witness, it would spit out 1. The circuit would spit out 1. And hence the witness is a satisfying assignment for the circuit. Okay. And so what's happening is, you can sort of think of the verifier as going gate by gate through the circuit. If it's and doing the gate operation like on the witness, or on the non-witness gates feeding into that gate, underneath the commitment. So the verifier ensures that the operation of each gate is done correctly without ever learning the values that are actually being operated upon. Okay, and I think there are two ways. So I'm going to skip the formal, soundness analysis of this, but you can actually take a prover that can produce, convincing proofs for this argument system and extract a witness out of the prover's head, and it goes the way you would want, you would expect it to. I think, the prover proved for each commitment to a witness element that it knew how to open that commitment. Right, using this special sound protocol we discussed earlier today. And so the way you would actually pull the witness out of the prover's head is for each of those witness elements, you would, rewind the prover once to get 2 accepting transcripts, that share the same first message for the sigma protocol that was run to establish that the prover knew how to open that commitment. You would extract the value inside the commitment from the transcripts. It's what value is inside those commitments, and then the prover also proved, so you get for free derived an operation over the committed values. So that's how you establish, once you put out of the PED, indeed click evaluate to 1. yeah, I'm, I'm just going to give two different one in this art, and then they'll be done for the. Let me proceed. Okay, so this is actually what actually transformation from zero knowledge argument.
I think you're cutting out.
Regional really, really dumb. So that system this yeah, so very big proof verify, and also it is and each data element. And then fully homomorphic encryption lets the server evaluate an arbitrary arithmetic circuit on the data without decrypting, right? So, here, the prover starts. The prover is like, somewhat ironically, is like the client in FHE. The prover here is the one with the private data. So the prover commits to each entry of the witness. That's like the client sending an encryption of each piece of data to the server in the FHE setting. Okay. Now the verifier is like the server. It sort of wants to evaluate this circuit on the encrypted, in this case, just committed data and confirm that the output is 1. But the verifier doesn't actually know the committed data. And in fact, the prover wants to keep that committed data secret, private, hidden from the verifier. So FHE, the F in FHE means you can do either additions or multiplications of encrypted values without decrypting. So you can take any two encrypted values and compute an encryption to their sum or to their product. And so with FHE, once the client sends the encrypted data to the server, there's really no more communication needed. The server itself can evaluate all addition and multiplication gates that it wants on the encrypted data and just send the encryption of the output back to the client who can decrypt the output. But with Peterson commitments, they are only additively homomorphic, not multiplicatively homomorphic. So what's happening is, like the verifier, which you should think of as analogous to the FHE server, can do addition gates on its own. So it can take two committed values and can compute on its own a commitment to their sum. But because Peterson commitments are not multiplicatively homomorphic, it cannot take two committed values and compute a commitment to the product. So the prover in this scheme needs to help, needs to actually send itself a commitment for each product gate. So send like a C3 for each product gate, and then prove that if the C3 is supposed to be a commitment to to the values inside two other commitments, it has to run a separate zero knowledge proof of knowledge to establish that the value inside C3, call it M3, indeed equals the values inside C1 and C2 producted together. So that's why in this ZK argument, there's extra communication from the prover to the verifier for each multiplication gate, whereas with FHE, the client merely encrypts the data itself, and there's no extra communication from client to server necessary for either addition or multiplication gates. So the key difference is FHE is both additively and multiplicatively homomorphic, whereas Peterson commitments are only additively homomorphic.
Hi, Justin.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it was just me, but I think you cut out for like 5 minutes or something. I think we heard the FHE part, but not like the earlier part, probably when you were talking about the
Okay.
5 minutes before FHE.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Let me try to remind myself what it was. Thank you for letting me know. I have no idea what happened there. And that next,
I think your
now that
internet has been a little bit shaky.
Okay. Okay. Well, in the future, now that I know this is a possibility, I'll monitor the chat a little more. So if this happens again, somebody can put it in the chat, I guess. But okay, so I cut out, you heard most or all of the FHE stuff. What I said before that, okay, yeah, what I said before that was a perspective.
Oh, you're also not sharing your screen either.
Oh, okay. I probably don't really need it now, but let me reshare it anyway, if I can. So the perspective I was sharing before that, which it sounds like got cut off, and apologies, you were just sitting there in silence for 5 minutes, was about snark composition. So you should tell me what you heard and what you didn't hear. But what I was saying was what we've seen today is really a completely generic transformation from any non-zero knowledge argument to a zero knowledge one. And so the non-zero knowledge argument we've applied this transformation to today is really, really, really dumb. It's the argument where the prover just sends the entire witness to the verifier, and the witness and the verifier just evaluates the circuit on the witness and confirms the output is one. And so what's happening here is sending that proof that the whole witness to the verifier, of course, violates zero knowledge. And so instead, what the prover is doing in the zero knowledge version is, rather than sending the non-zero knowledge proof in the clear, it's instead sending commitments to each field element in the non-zero knowledge proof. And then it's proving in zero knowledge that the field elements inside the commitments would have passed the non-zero knowledge verifier's checks. So in this dumb proof system that's not zero knowledge, the verifier's checks would literally be just evaluate the circuit on the sent witness gate by gate. Yeah, the way the prover proves that the committed field elements would pass the verifier's checks is it sort of goes gate by gate through the circuit and sends a commitment to the value of each gate and proves that the committed value for that gate indeed respects the operation of the gate. So if it's a multiplication gate, that it the committed value for the multiplication gate indeed is the product of the committed values of the two things that should be multiplied together by that gate. And so you can apply this generic transformation to any snark. And so the way that looks in the end, when you view it as snark composition, is we're taking a non-zero knowledge snark. Okay, we're taking the verifier of that snark. Okay, we're turning it into a circuit. Right. The prover then commits to each element of the non-zero knowledge snark proof and proves that those committed values would have caused the circuit to output one, that is, would have passed the non-zero knowledge snark verifier's check. Okay, and so we're sort of what we're doing is we're taking the non-zero knowledge snark and we're taking a non-succinct zero knowledge argument for circuit sat, and we're literally just composing the two arguments in the same sense that people mean today when they talk about snark composition. It's just our zero knowledge argument is not succinct, but it's sort of it's somewhat okay. Like we can still get a succinct argument out by taking a succinct non-zero knowledge argument, composing it with the non-succinct zero knowledge one. Then you sort of inherit the succinctness from the non-zero knowledge one, because the verifier as a circuit is small, because the non-zero knowledge thing was succinct, meaning the verifier is fast, and so it's a small circuit, and you inherit the zero knowledge from the zero knowledge one. So you only sort of need one of the two to be succinct to get a zero knowledge snark. And what apologies if I'm now saying this twice because you heard me, but it seems like no one's interrupted, so you didn't hear this. So people in practice don't actually use this transformation, and I think the reason is that this non-succinct zero knowledge argument is like very non-succinct, because for each multiplication gate in the circuit, you're sending, you're actually running a Sigma protocol, the thing that we black box. And I said, just have a look at the book if you care to see the details for these multiplication operations. And that Sigma protocol entails sending something like, 10 group elements per multiplication gate. And so these proofs would get pretty big in practice. So what people will actually do is like much more bespoke transformations from non-zero knowledge snarks to zero knowledge ones that add less overhead. But conceptually, what this means is like the right way to design zero knowledge snarks, I think, is to first design a non-zero knowledge snark. Just do not worry about zero knowledge at all. Like only worry about succinctness and prover time and everything else. And then just only later render it zero knowledge. And typically you'll be able to render it zero knowledge, with enough, sort of tedious effort as a protocol designer that you won't actually, you'll make it ZK and it won't affect the performance much at all to make it ZK compared to non-ZK. And that is why we're sort of not talking about ZK until now. We're sort of up to chapter 12 in the book or whatever. And only now are we seeing our first like ZK snark. And the reason to defer it so long is like the core snark design has nothing to do with ZK, and you should just add ZK later. In fact, the ZK here is perfect because these Peterson commitments are perfectly hiding, and yeah, all of the Sigma protocols that go into this ZK thing that we saw today, they're all perfect. Honest verifier, perfect ZK. If you fiat Shamir them, the honest verifier distinction goes away; it doesn't become relevant anymore. So that the snarks you see in practice, while they don't literally use this transformation we saw today, they do tend to be perfect zero knowledge, and the only computational security aspect is in the soundness and not in the ZK. Okay, that's everything I had to say today. Apologies again for the drop off, and I'll keep an eye out on that for future weeks. If you do have questions, I can stick around a bit longer. But otherwise, thanks for coming. Welcome back. And next week we're going to start talking about polynomial commitment schemes like Hyrax, bulletproofs, and KZG. So it should be an interesting few weeks because bulletproofs and KZG in particular are pretty popular polynomial commitment schemes that form the heart of a lot of deployed snarks today. And they're also very pretty protocols. So I'm looking forward to covering them. Yeah, so let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, see you next week. Have a great weekend.
Cool. Yeah, very exciting. I had one question.
Go ahead.
So in this protocol, why can't you just send R for the final, like the final commitment to 1? Why can't you just send R?
Great. Yeah, great. So that should leak something. Let's think about it. So okay, so let's say perhaps it's possible you could. So I might have to think about it offline and get back to you. But one thing I'm worried about initially is, let's say the final output gate is a sum. So maybe it'd be okay. So let's say there are these two multiplication gates that are being summed to get the final output. And let's say C1 is G to the M1 times H to the R1, and C2 is G to the M2 times H to the R2. So, and this final commitment should be C, and C is G times H to the R1 plus R2. So if I just tell you this, I'm telling you the sum of these two blinding factors. Maybe that's fine. Okay, so that might not lead to a gross violation of zero knowledge, but so yeah, okay. I don't have a super clear answer to you. I'd be a little worried. So if let's say C2 were like an unblinded, let's just say we're unblinded. So let's say R2 were known to be zero. That's not what the protocol calls for. So let's just modify that. Like conceptually, if I just add in, okay, so let's say C2 is G to the 0 times H to the 0. C2 is just the group element 1, right? And so bringing in like a gate whose value is fixed to 0, and it's an unblinded commitment to 0. So it shouldn't like break anything to do that. In like a well-designed protocol or something. It doesn't change the value of the gate that you're adding it to. It just shouldn't change anything. Okay, but if it's unblinded, then this R1 plus R2 is just R1, and so just telling you that R1 is telling you the blinding factor of like the C1. You know, the C1 is like the real output, and we've just added 0 to C1, and it shouldn't really change anything. But by virtue of sort of running a non-zero knowledge protocol to say that, you know, the final output gate has value 1, I've now told you the blinding factor. No, but I'm claiming it's value 1. So do you not just that just moves the problem up 1. Okay. You know what? Okay, I don't have I don't see an attack. It might be fine. It might be fine to just open the final commitment completely. Maybe that. Yeah. Okay. So you're suggesting just open the final commitment rather than prove you could open it if you wanted to. I think that might just be fine.
Yeah, but maybe harder to argue. So.
Yeah, and so you'd have to go into all of these questions. Sort of, I think the right way to think about them is first think about it intuitively, the way I just babbled about, and my intuition is always embarrassingly slow. Whether something is sort of breaking zero knowledge or not. So you just heard how slow and embarrassing it is. But sort of once you've thought about the intuition, the next thing to do is always just look at the simulator, and see, like, does the simulator still work or not? And if it still works, then of course what you just suggested is still zero knowledge. And if it doesn't work, then there's a very good chance you've now broken zero knowledge. And then you should maybe return back to an intuitive approach where you actually try to come up with an attack that grossly makes obvious that not just your simulator needs to change, but in fact there is no simulator because you just like learned something about the witness. No, but I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think intuitively you're probably right. Like, it's probably fine for the prover to just open up the final commitment to 1 and, thereby revealing the blinding factor for the final commitment. There's no, who cares that it's blinded or not. If the prover is telling the verifier, hey, this is a commitment to value 1, there's no point to blinding that. So I think you're right. I think I made things on this sort of complicated. The prover could just open the final commitment to 1, that no reason to run Schnorr. So thank you for catching that. I think the book is pretty sketchy as to the simulator, just because, this protocol is made up by, separately running a whole bunch of zero knowledge protocols, like 1 per multiplication gate in the circuit, an element of the witness. And it says, well, just like put the concatenate the simulators together one after the other. And so it's pretty sketchy, but you could have a look at that and think about it, and probably the simulator works just fine.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for the thought process too.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Don't judge me. Yeah. Other questions?
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned this Sigma protocol for proving a product relationship a couple of times. So is it does it achieve like the same outcome as like pairings do, but maybe with less machinery? So it only requires having Pedersen commitments. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So with a pairing lets you do literally like one. It lets you do exactly what you just said. It lets you do 1 product check on committed elements without extra help from the prover. So the benefit of the zero knowledge proof of knowledge is you don't need a pairing friendly group. The downside is you have like 10 extra group elements appended to the proof, and the verifier has to do, process those 10 group elements with extra group operations in its checks. And also there's fiat Shamir going on when you turn it into a snark, right? Because the Sigma protocol has 1 round of interaction, and you have to get rid of that with fiat Shamir. So yeah, that's another reason. It's a great question. It's another reason why in practice people often don't use something like this Sigma protocol. They would just use pairings. But I guess this Sigma protocol, like, again, bulletproofs is like a generalized Sigma protocol. It's like a multi-round Sigma protocol. So this Sigma protocol is, you could think of as being closer to bulletproofs, which avoids pairings, but has longer proofs. Whereas anything with pairings, you should immediately think of KZG, which is, famous for having like very, very short proofs. But of course needs pairings and also needs a trusted setup. Yeah, so you're totally right.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, and then I guess one more elaboration with the pairing stuff. Just trying to think this out. So let's say you had like a bunch of multiplication gates. Okay, so I think if you were using the pairing approach, I still think the prover, would have to commit to the value of each multiplication gate. And then it would have to do one pairing check for each multiplication gate. So that's really expensive. That's still not something you want to do. Pairings are way more expensive than group operations. So I'd say at that point, you're really just trading off. In addition to using pairing friendly group, you're probably increasing the amount of work the verifier is doing. I'm pretty sure pairings are sufficiently more expensive than group ops that doing one pairing per multiplication gate is way worse than doing like 10 or 12 group ops or whatever per multiplication gate. So you're increasing the verifier's work with all the pairings, but decreasing the proof size because and also potentially avoiding fiat Shamir. So I think that's a slightly more complete description of all the trade-offs that using pairings to do the multiplication checks would introduce here. Yeah, so like growth 16, I think the verifier does like 3 pairings. So doing one pairing per multiplication gate in the circuit you're applying like your snark to, like that's way more expensive than like a growth 16 verifier, unless your circuit has almost no multiplication gates at all. Cool. Okay, last chance for questions.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for walking through that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great question.
What would you say is the difference between like hiding properties and zero knowledge? Like, does zero knowledge imply hiding or?
Yeah, so I would say to get a zero knowledge snark, you either need your commitment schemes to always be hiding, or you need to use snark composition. Okay, so having everything you commit to be hiding is not enough. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary for ZK. Unless you're committing to values that themselves already have no information whatsoever about the witness in them, right? And yeah, so the way to design a ZK snark is either take something non-ZK and compose it with something ZK, or if you're not doing composition, every commitment that's sent to the verifier better be hiding, better leak no information about what's inside of it, unless it's just some garbage value that already has nothing to do with the witness. The reason hiding commitments are not enough to give you ZK is because in all of these snarks, like not only does the prover commit to stuff, it also proves that the committed values satisfy certain relationships. And so those proofs also have to be ZK. And so like with KZG, I don't have everything cached in my head right now, but I think like the basic KZG, KZG is a polynomial commitment scheme unless the prover to commit to a polynomial, and then later, reveal a requested evaluation of the polynomial and a proof that the evaluation is indeed consistent with the committed polynomial. I think off the shelf, it's not ZK. Certainly not perfect ZK. I think, the commitment, the KZG commitment is like sort of, it's a group generator to the committed polynomial evaluated at a hidden point tau. This is like the toxic waste in the trusted setup. It's not clear to me how to think about whether this commitment leaks information about the polynomial, because no one should know tau. So should I, I don't know. So I don't know how to think about that. But then the evaluation proof is anyway, I shouldn't try to think about this stuff on the fly when I'm probably going to make a mistake. But yeah, what I can say is, I know that like privacy preserving rollup projects have to like go and sort of do some extra work to make KZG stuff ZK. So yeah, anyway, the short version is that the commitments better be hiding, but on top of that, if you actually prove anything about the committed values, those proofs also have to be zero knowledge. Otherwise, they will be leaking information about the committed values, even if the commitment itself is hiding. Is that a clean enough answer?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, and so and just to give I guess a little more rambling flavor, I think chapter, I think it's 12, maybe it's 13 of the book actually covers two ways to make non-ZK snarks ZK. So the first one we talked about today. The second one is more specific. It's specific to some check-based snarks. But it's very similar ideas are used to make other snarks ZK. In particular, if you want to make Fry-based things ZK, you do similar stuff. Fry, Lajero. It's called masking polynomials. And the rough idea is, can I present a rough idea in a sentence? Like if I want to send you like a sequence of group elements, I don't know. The rough idea is if I want to send you a field element A, but A leaks information about the witness, instead what I'm going to do is commit. I'm going to like add a random value to A, and maybe I think committing to one field element is not doesn't. Okay, sorry. If I want to commit to like a vector of random field elements, A1 to AL, where L is like relatively big, and then later reveal like just a small number of field elements worth of information about this big vector. So say I commit to the big vector field elements, but then reveal just a handful of additional field elements sort of derived from the big vector. I guess what I can do is kind of add some random padding to A1 to AL. So add like R1, R2, R3, and commit to the randomly padded thing. And if I'm careful about it, I can ensure that like sort of revealing any three field elements worth of information about the padded thing doesn't tell you any information about A1 to AL, right? So like I'm adding enough degrees of freedom here with the extra random padding that I can then reveal three field elements worth of information about the whole, padded thing, and I still told you no information about A1 to AL itself. And so so I commit to the padded thing. I then reveal this extra information about the padded thing, and that tells you nothing about the unpadded stuff. That's sort of the idea behind masking polynomials. And the nice thing about them is there's no homomorphic commitments used. So the commitment, the commitment to this padded thing can be based just on like Merkle hashing techniques. And that way you avoid, so the whole thing looks nothing like a Sigma protocol, because Sigma protocols tend to be based on like cryptographic groups and homomorphic commitments and things like that. And so, yeah, if you want to, plausibly post-quantum ZK snark, or you just think that group operations are expensive or whatever, you'd want to go through this sort of masking polynomials approach. But yeah, here, you know, the viewpoint is consistent with, I guess, how I try to address your question, even though I did a really bad rambling job of it, where I'm thinking of the prover committing to a big vector of values, and then later, as you know, part of a proof that those committed values satisfy certain properties, there's some extra field elements sent, and you need to, for ZK, you need to make sure not only is the commitment hiding and revealing no or very little information about the committed padded thing, but yeah, when you add up like all information revealed to the verifier between both the commitment and the extra proof stuff, there's sort of there's enough padding to make sure that all that revealed information is fully randomized by the padding. So you can't infer, the verifier can't infer anything about the unpadded elements from the commitment plus the proof. Okay, I hope that's a little bit helpful. I'm sure it was not super helpful.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Last questions? Okay, so we'll wrap up then. So I will see you next week, and we'll either start discussing. I think we'll start with Hyrax, and then we'll either start discussing bulletproofs or KZG. So see you then. Have a great weekend.
See you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.